The heavy odor of incense became unbearable. Michael shrouded himself in the semi-darkness of the church hall. With a blank stare, he watched as the priest chanted an requiem prayer in a monotonous voice, waved his censer, enveloped in the smoke of the fields. A smooth oak coffin. Calm, the crowd that had gathered to see Adriana off on her final journey responded to the clergyman's actions with quiet, blind, and peaceful shaking it. For Michael, everything around him ceased to exist. He saw only his wife's pale face, forever frozen in stillness. It seemed that she was only sleeping and was about to wake up. Her lips trembled and bent in a soft smile. And Adriana would habitually extend her good morning, beloved. Alas, it was all but an illusion. Roses white as snow, roses filled the coffin. Looking at his wife's favorite flowers, Michael involuntarily let a tear fall. No one would condemn him for his tears. Not here, that's for sure. The man shifted his gaze to the flame of the candle burned in his hand. That's how a man thinks he burns. And then an unknown force smothers his flame. That's all. Is it possible that a young, healthy woman, a loving wife, and mother just leaves like that? Who decides how much of a gelding we are? Why some are destined to lead a miserable existence, to suffer poverty and disease, but to live? Others are robbed by God of their happiness at its peak. Adriana left this world. Never again will her laughter ring through the air. Never will her gentle hands soothe the deep eyes or flood everything around her with endless compassion. And what's the point of blaming anyone now? There's no bringing her back. Michael, how are you holding up? Asked Benjamin, his oldest, most loyal friend. Hey, when the coffin was loaded into the hearse, I still can't accept the fact that she's in there. Michael nodded his head toward the black car. I was always taught that a man must endure all the challenges that fate throws his way. But it's one thing to talk about it, another to face it face to face. I don't know how to look into my daughter's eyes now. She's not old enough to realize the loss. After the accident, when I told her my mom was gone, she kind of withdrew into herself. A 7-year-old child. It's a shock to hear about the death of someone you love. But how could I lie to her? Why keep her hoping for nothing? So she'd flinch every time she heard the hypnotist come in? The phone? Or the front door? No. And I have no right to be unfair to my daughter. She's going through a terrible grief right now. But it's better this way. We have each other. And I will do anything to make Betty happy again. No matter how hard it is. You're right. Benjamin nodded. I'm amazed at your resilience. If you need any help, you're welcome to it. Don't even think about it. Thank you. Whoop! Michael patted his comrade on the shoulder. Now all that remained was to learn to live without Adriana. She wasn't just a wife and mother. She was a woman. She had a way of making everything become whole, full of meaning. Even the smallest of troubles she knew how to turn to her advantage. I can't do that. She's the reason I am who I am today. If only she'd listened to me then, stayed home. Women are stubborn, her being on her own. Why? Why did she go? Michael burst into tears. Some people began to come to him to comfort him and once again to offer condolences. But Michael didn't hear them. He automatically answered, nodded, and his thoughts were with the one he once loved more than his life. Michael didn't remember the funeral or the wake. It was fake, staged, mourning speeches, tears. The man was grateful to his wife's relatives that they took all the trouble to organize the funeral. All he could do was pay for this sad act. Michael drank heavily, shot after shot. The booze did its job, bringing at least temporary, but calm. Gradually, everyone dispersed. The man remained in the banquet hall, rented for the wake, all alone, and not counting a couple of acquaintances, who by and large did not care about him. Benjamin came from somewhere and helped Michael up from the two sat from the table. Michael, let's go home. I'll drive you home. Suddenly, Michael's heavy arm was thrown over his shoulder. I don't want anything about it, Michael informed. Put me down. I want another drink. You've had enough. Let's go. Benjamin contradicted him calmly. You got one close by? Not alone. You know exactly what I mean. She needs her father now. They're all your nanny's governesses. Benjamin drove the struggling Michael to the car and loaded him into the back seat. To the village where the Williams family's country house was located. It was a decent drive, and it was rush hour. Wednesday evening. Benjamin arrived at the huge mansion behind a high fence around 10. He called the security desk. Good evening, Benjamin. A large man in a black uniform greeted him. Sonny waved him over to Benjamin and headed for the back door of his car. Calling for more guys. Brought your chief. You get him tucked in? Tell Kathy to make some strong tea. Tell him to drink it if he wakes up and gets violent. We'll do that, the guard said. What would we do without you? It hurts to see the chief in such a broken state. No, Adriana. It's all coming apart right now. Not for the cracking, Benjamin replied confidently. Just make sure he doesn't do anything stupid and take the booze home somewhere else. He needs to spend more time with his daughter. The man handed his friend to the guards, who took him to the front door. After standing for a couple more minutes at the gate, Benjamin got into his car and drove home. Michael, Kathy wailed, taking off her master's jacket. What's what? You're so drunk that it's no way to pour alcohol on your SARS. You should have thought about the girl. Shut up, Michael. I'm not drunk. Yes, you are. You can't even undress yourself. I'll make you some tea, and on an empty stomach. Oh, what a woe. Stay here. I'll be right back. You might want to give me a vodka Kathy or something. Well, I'm already full. Just a strong cup of tea and straight to bed. Do you need sleep? I've already put Betty to bed. Poor girl. Thank God she didn't have to go to the funeral. She wouldn't have made it. Kathy left Michael alone. He was lying on the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. What the hell is that crystal for? A thought flashed through the man's mind at the sight of the huge chandeliers that adorned the living room. It's all just a sham, some fragments of former happiness. Adriana would tell me everything right now. And the fact that I got drunk and that I made myself look like that in front of the servants. Everything to Gagarin. No one will say anything. Kathy will only lament. What do I care what she thinks? I hate them all. They live on their own, get their paychecks, and pretend to care about my grief. Without Adriana, nothing makes sense anymore. 10 years she was everything to me. And then, bang, some little fool out of control. Just took her away. Is there any justice in life? It was Saturday. They were supposed to be celebrating their wedding anniversary. Michael was talking worriedly into the phone. Listen, I'm here, delayed a little, maybe at this restaurant. We'll celebrate at home. Order everything we need. You do not know how, Adriana replied with a picture of offense. I'm so beautiful tonight. I would like to shine in society so that everyone would be jealous of you. Besides, it's not by chance that we chose the restaurant where we had our first date. Take your time, I'll drive myself. I'll ask William to drive me. William had already gone home. Michael resisted. It's his birthday too. Let him celebrate in peace. Show some humanity. I told him he could be free after 4 a.m. Okay, my wife gave up, but there's nothing stopping me from driving myself. I could stop by your office and then we could go to the restaurant together. What time are you off? How persistent are you? Michael laughed as he drove up at 7. I think I'll be done by then. See you later, sweetheart. Adriana counted it and disconnected. Michael did not know that he had heard his wife's voice for the last time. It was already the beginning of the 8th. Michael called his wife, but the mechanical voice of the answering machine answered at the other end of the line. A vague uneasiness settled in his chest, and then he received a call from an unknown number. Williams Michael. The man's voice was aloof and metallic. Michael Williams answered anxiously. Adriana, who are you? Inside, everything smelled of business. Oh, the very tone of the caller said that something was wrong. Michael felt it with his whole being. It's my wife, he answered in a trembling voice. What happened?
At about 7:30 this afternoon, there was a traffic accident on half the highway. I'm afraid your wife is dead. She died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. This is Senior Investigator Filatov speaking. I'm sorry for your loss.
You're confused, mumbled Michael. His voice trembled. The man tried to keep his composure. Surely this man is just playing a cruel trick on him. I'm afraid he is. You must come to the Tsiolkovsky morgue now to identify the body. If this is a joke, you'll regret it, Michael growled into the phone. Mind you, I won't leave it like that. Michael, the policeman replied calmly. No jokes. I'm an official. I understand how hard it is for the relatives of the deceased to hear such news. Please come. Please, we will discuss everything on the spot. Michael went down from the office to the car on woozy legs, trying to find the exact address of the morgue in his phone. He was there in 15 minutes. At the entrance, he was already met by Filatov. It was already a not young man in uniform. Hello again. He shook Michael's hand. Come with me. I warn you that it's not a pleasant sight, but you can't do without this procedure. When the sheet that covered the body was tossed in front of Michael, he almost cried out, no doubt. Adriana's bloody face lay before him, cloaked in pain, drained, and the dried strands of hair framing her forehead eerily. He wouldn't have even recognized her if it weren't for the earrings' glimmers, giving out in the agony of her ears. There Michael had given his wife a very long time ago, an author's piece of jewelry made from his own sketch. The heart pounded desperately, and then as if frozen, the man moved his lips soundlessly, and tears rolled from his eyes. It's her, he said with an effort. Are you sure? Asked the investigator. No doubt at all. Tell me what happened. Adriana left the house in high spirits. She rarely drove, preferring to ride in the passenger seat. She was a good driver, but Michael insisted that a woman shouldn't be behind the wheel. She never argued. But this time, she was so excited about the upcoming holiday that she insisted on driving herself. When Adriana left the house, all dressed up, radiant and happy, a couple of security guards at the entrance of the house were showering her with compliments. Adriana was very pleased. She knew their words, and sincere. They were simply expressing the workers' appreciation for the mistress. The shift supervisor smiled broadly at her and wished her a good evening. And spinning Nessie beside her mother joked merrily and asked to be taken along. But her mother explained to her that today's evening was only for her and her father, and tomorrow they would celebrate together. The girl was a little upset, but realizing what was going on, she kissed Adriana goodbye and took her into the house. Adriana! I got into the car, turned on the music, and drove leisurely out of the settlement. It took about half an hour to get to the center of town on the highway. The road was almost empty. Adriana sang along to the song, born from the speaker, and happily anticipated the upcoming evening. Already, the oncoming stream of cars was sparkling, welcoming the woman, winking their headlights. Everything around seemed to rejoice with her. Immersed in her thoughts, Adriana did not even notice how a small SUV jumped out from the left lane of the road directly towards her, The woman saw him too late. There was no way to avoid the collision. The car was sharply pushed by a woman, unsuccessfully trying to twist the steering wheel. The car spun and was thrown to the side of the road, where a concrete pillar was already rushing towards it. Adriana's car hit the solid pillar right at the driver's door. And then there was silence. The rescuers who arrived at the scene of the accident somehow extracted the woman trapped in the cabin. They even had to cut the mangled and taped in the neck intentionally doors. But it was too late. Adriana had lost too much blood. She died in the ambulance without regaining consciousness, so the kid who caused the accident was sitting on the pavement with his head on the ground. He had recently received his license and at some point could not cope with the control and at full speed jumped out onto the oncoming road. Hey! They put him in the ambulance too, although there was no visible damage. Where is he? Michael asked the policeman coldly when he had finished his story. They took him from the hospital to the detention center. They're taking tests now, but to me the guy is completely sober. I can't tell you exactly what happened yet. According to him, the steering wheel refused to listen to something with the brakes. He's in shock. He's very confused. I'll give you a chance to talk when he comes to his senses. Would you be driving home right now? Is there anyone close to you? You can't be alone right now. I can give you a ride. No. Thank you. Michael gritted his teeth. I'll drive myself. It's dangerous in this state of health. But it's up to you, shrugged Filatov. I'll call you tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. In the meantime, inform your relatives, and I'll take care of it myself, reluctantly replied Michael. The only thing that bothered him now was how to inform his daughter about Adriana's death. Daddy, are you there? Betty peered into the darkened bedroom. The dense curtains hanging on the windows barely let in any sunlight. Michael moved heavily and mumbled something incomprehensible in response. Betty quietly stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The girl hesitated for a moment, then slowly made her way to the bed. She sat down next to him and began stroking her father's arm. Kitten, have you barely pissed your eyelids? In a hoarse voice, Michael asked. Yes, Daddy, sobbed Haya the girl. Kathy told me not to come in to see you, but I really want to be with you.
Just for a minute. Give it up, baby, Michael suggested. Betty obediently jumped on the bed and pressed her whole body against her father. He snuggled back and felt tears flowing from his eyes. Daddy, don't cry, Betty said quietly. Mommy always said men don't cry. It's okay now, Michael stroked her head. I promise this is the last time. How are you feeling? Better, but I still miss Mommy a lot. Me too, my daughter, me too. It's okay, you and I can still be happy.
Mommy will be happy for us. We don't want to upset her. How will she know? She's in your heart forever. And if you're sad, she'll feel it. If you're happy, she'll be happy. Then I'll never be sad.
Daddy, I'll try my best. I want Mommy to always be happy too. That's good, my girl. Let's do a little more of the regimen, then we'll go to breakfast or Kathy will scold you. About an hour later, Michael and Betty went down to the dining room, where breakfast was waiting for them on the table. Kathy, seeing the crying faces of father and daughter, only spat out with her hands, Yes, you and my poor. Nothing. Everything will pass. Sit down at the table. It's really getting cold by now. Kathy, don't worry, Michael interrupted her. It's all right. We'll eat the cold stuff. Really? Betty, I only had milk with a bun, nodded the girl, and immediately took a big bite from the appetizing healthy. Michael, the housekeeper addressed the man. The office called. They can't reach you. Yes, I disconnected the phone. Chewing, answered Michael. What do they want? Some foreigners have arrived. Would you call back? William will do it himself, of course, but apparently they can't do it without you. All right, tight. All right, Daddy. Betty stepped in. I didn't go to school today. Isn't that scary? No, kitten, it's not. You're on vacation. Soon, you'll be home, and after the vacation, you'll start going to classes again. You and I need to get back to our senses before we go to school. In any other situation, the girl would be very happy at the prospect of skipping classes at the gymnasium. But now she is lazily picking with a spoon in the crystal rosette with jam, and the expression on her face was extremely saddened. "What shall we do today?" asked her father. "I don't know." Betty shrugged. "I have a headache. I'm going out for a bit." "I'm good." "And then how was your rest?" "Let's go for a walk in the woods with you." "How would you like that?" Well, the girl nodded. Something in her behavior did not please Michael. Betty sat pale, though she had been fine before breakfast. Kathy took the girl to her room. Michael sat alone for a long time, holding his cell phone. He didn't feel like calling the office. "I'm fed up with everything," he thought. "What's the point of making money now? What I have is more than enough for a secure old age, not only for me, but also for my future children. The business has long been successfully functioning without my participation. Maybe, but his? Become a hermit, go away somewhere, put Betty in some private boarding house in Switzerland. They'll take better care of her there than I will." Adriana was motivated. She needed development all the time. In the 10 years we lived together, her energy was the only real source of my progress. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have taken the risk of going into loans back then. When there was no energy left, failure followed. And difficulties arose at every turn. I was ready to give up, but as soon as she smiled at me, hugged me, I was thirsty to reap pine trees that were the reason for buying a plot of land in this community. Little Betty, then just barely 2 years old, was diagnosed with asthma. Adriana realized quickly that the pine air had healing properties. And although the price tag for the plot seemed simply cosmic at the time, Michael did not spare the money and has never regretted it since. For all the time of living here, the girl almost never had an attack. He himself is actively engaged in jogging, running among the pine trees, bursting to the sky on the mossy paths. It was pleasant and useful, and the solitude that this forest gave, despite its proximity to residential houses, was the magic remedy that Michael's body so desperately demanded. It had been standing since the middle of April. It had been a snowy winter, and so the snow was almost all standing in the forest. It lay only in the lowlands where little sunlight fell on the sparse foliage, and a greenish haze was already visible. Michael sucked in a full chestful of air. It burned her in a wave and spilled over her lungs. In there it pleasantly protected the odors of pine needles, resin, wet earth, and something else elusive that always accompanies the arrival of spring, caused in the soul of the man a feeling of nostalgia. After standing for a while at the edge of the forest and listening to the birds trill, Michael ran. He hadn't practiced in a long time. Somehow there was no time, and then winter. Sneakers trampled in the soft, red-carpeted soil. But it didn't bother him much to run. The air was still cool, but the heated Michael didn't notice it. He ran without stopping. At first, he was tormented by shortness of breath, caused by yesterday's excessive drinking. But soon the man was able to normalize his breathing rhythm and find his pace. Michael saw nothing around him. He simply moved forward, and his feet led the stomping of the warpipe by themselves. He seemed to fall into a kind of trance, supported by peaceful breathing and the sounds of pine needles used by sneakers. Suddenly, a strange sound brought Michael out of his stupor. He slowed his pace slightly and listened. Some kind of bird? The man thought. It felt like a child's cry. But I've run far away from the village. I don't think children come here. But the crying was repeated. Michael stopped abruptly. He leaned with his hands on his knees and breathed heavily. Realizing the breath, the man shouted, "There is someone!" There was no answer. To Michael's ear came the noise of some breaking branches. The first thought in Michael's mind was bear. But he immediately reproached himself. What bears could there be here? Only squirrels are the biggest animals here, and that's a lot of bears to meet. Michael stood still for a while, but he heard no more crying. I hope no one got lost. I've heard that it's easy for children to get lost in the woods, and if you don't help them in time, it's all right. I'll remember the spot just in case. You never know. Michael didn't run any further. It was time to return home. Returning, the man realized that only in one direction he had run at least 10 kilometers, without noticing it. The summit began to darken. The sun had already set, and the forest was becoming unaccustomedly eerie. Michael walked the rest of the way at a brisk pace. His lungs did not agree to running. In addition, the dog stabbed intolerably. The man literally fell out the wicket in the backyard and immediately sat down in the gazebo. His mind was completely blank. Michael just sat there looking up at the sky. The first star had already appeared on the horizon. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from the house. Sanya! He shouted to the guard. But there was no answer. The guard booth was quite far from the backyard, so it was not surprising that no one answered. One thing guards have to be on guard for. There's no telling what's going to happen here. They should put another station here, so they don't have to play their cards too much. Michael got up and walked briskly toward the house. When Kathy saw him, she shrieked, "Michael, where are you going?" Betty felt bad that the man had gone pale.
What happened? Where is she? She's upstairs sleeping right now. I called Smith. He's on his way. A seizure? Yes, it looks like it. Me and Galia for Brizgalov, but she's still choking. I called her an ambulance, of course, but I think We'll be here in a couple minutes. Michael climbed the stairs to his daughter's room. Next to her sat the maid, who loved the little girl dearly and often played with her when she wasn't in class. Betty lay with her head in the girl's lap and gulped for air with her mouth. "Oh my God!" Michael shouted and sat down on the floor near the girl. "Sit her down at once. She can't lie down." "Now I'll prepare the compressor." He rushed to the cupboard that contained all the compressor inhalations. It was rarely used, but Michael remembered how Adriana used to use it. He stocked the medicine compartment with drops from the bottle next to it and poured some from the solution. Immediately, he plugged the device into the outlet and brought the plastic mask up to Betty's face. The compressor hummed monotonously, and vapor began to flow from the mask. "Come on, honey, breathe," he said, looking at his daughter. "Worries. Remember the right way." Betty held the mask to her mouth, nodded to her father, and breathed deeply for about a minute. Michael sat there, trying not to move. Then footsteps were heard outside the door. It was Smith. "Good evening, Mikhail," greeted the doctor. "Thank God, Ethan, I was so scared. I gave her this medicine. There's nothing else." "Well, maybe there is, but we'll have to look for it." "Usually Adriana." "Michael, calm down. You did the high-eat thing. Let's take a look. I brought everything you need. So, girl, leave us alone for now." The old man turned to Clara. The maid obediently went out. "Mikhail, can you go out too? Shall I call?" "No, I'll stay." Mikhail shook his head. Ethan measured him with a glance, but said nothing. He took out a yearning from the net, listened to Betty's blood pressure, and asked her to blow into some tube, the purpose of which Michael didn't know. "Betty, are you feeling better?" asked the old man to the girl. She nodded. "The increase again, the swabs? So have you called an ambulance yet?" "The seizure is pretty bad, but I think we can do without hospitalization. I'm not sure what's causing it, to be honest. It could be seasonal, though. But as far as I know, Betty doesn't have a problem with pollen or anything like that, and her asthma is not allergic. But she was fine during the day. Really, in the afternoon, Betty complained of not feeling well and went to lie down.
A seizure can spike if there's a catalyst. Don't forget the girl was in shock. Nervous overstrain could have caused the panic attack. As a consequence, none of this is being experienced by either of you. It's all quite normal. The most important thing is to take a course of medication now. I'm writing to you now to tell you what to get at the hospital. It's the same thing they would have prescribed anyway. When Ethan left, the ambulance arrived. The doctors looked at the girl and offered to take her to the hospital, but Michael refused. He told the paramedic that the family doctor had already visited them and prescribed the necessary medication. It's up to you, the paramedic shrugged. But still, if the attack happens again, it's better not to hesitate. Take the girl to the hospital. It's no joke, you know. Michael sent one of the guards to the pharmacy with a prescription. Soon, he returned with a bag. Michael stayed with his daughter all night, but she seemed to be feeling better. Betty began to fade before his eyes. The seizures had receded, but the girl's overall health was only getting worse. Ethan insisted that Michael take the baby to see a pediatrician he knew. The doctor examined the baby, but found her physically completely healthy. How can she be healthy? Michael was outraged. She had lost so much weight in 2 weeks. She has no appetite at all. I'm afraid the problem is purely psychological. The doctor shrugged. As far as I know, Betty recently lost her mother. That's an adult, and not everyone can handle it. But here's a 7-year-old child, and her asthma has taken its toll. I'm going to send you for some tests now. Only then can we look at what's going on in detail. But if I were you, I'd take the girl to a psychologist. There's a very good one at our clinic. I can make a referral. If you do not take action now, the next nervous breakdown may provoke a much stronger automatic attack than the last time. And in general, the child needs to be worked with now, so that it does not negatively affect the rest of his life. Okay, Michael nodded. As long as it helps. I just can't watch her suffer. As the pediatrician had expected, the tests were normal. Physically, Betty was healthy. Michael took her daughter to a psychologist right away. What went on in the office, the man did not know. A stern-looking woman in round glasses named Cindy asked him to stay in the hallway for the time being. For half an hour, Michael sat on an uncomfortable sofa, studying the paintings on the walls. The drawings depicted scenes from some children's cartoons that the man had never even heard of. Betty didn't watch cartoons. Adriana immediately interested the girl in books. Strange round creatures of wild colors, remotely resembling animals, were doing something incomprehensible. Yes, Michael muttered. Weird cartoons these days. It's not easy to be a modern child these days. At that moment, the office door opened and the psychologist invited Michael inside. Betty was sitting at a small table, writing passionately. Michael, have a seat, Cindy said in a low voice. Betty will fill out some test forms and I'll let you go. But first we need to talk. Yes, Michael nodded. Tell me straight out what's wrong with Betty. I'll do whatever you say. I don't want to make any premature diagnoses. Maybe Betty's just in psychological shock, and it'll pass in time. But personally, I suspect post-traumatic stress disorder. What's that? Michael's tense. It's a mental state that occurs after a tragic event. Betty lost her mother. Now she feels helpless, lost. Memories keep reappearing in her mind, forcing her to relive the terrible events. Hence the apathy and loss of appetite? If you do not take action, this can have terrible consequences for the psycho-emotional state of the baby. Wait, but the thing is, Betty was surprisingly calm about the news of my wife's death. Well, it's hard to call it calm, but she and I have talked about it many times. Betty is a very well-developed girl, sensible. It's always frightened me that she has an adult perspective on many things. You see, the disease I'm telling you about, it doesn't manifest itself immediately. usually weeks or even years after a tragic event. There was shock at first. Betty just didn't fully realize what had happened was true. A latent period of relative calm is normal. Physically, illness is not. Although in your daughter's case, I wouldn't say that. She does have asthma, and anxiety disorders can cause attacks or exacerbations, but the worst part is the personality deformity. Betty may have flash squirrels, causing her to relive what happened over and over again. In addition to anxiety and inner tension, signs such as chronic fatigue, memory lapses, loss of attention, heart problems, and more may appear. I'm not going to tell you all of this now. It's too early to make a diagnosis. These are just assumptions, but I'm preparing you for the worst. If nothing is done in time, Betty will eventually turn into insane, mentally ill. Is that what you're saying? Michael interrupted the doctor nervously. But that's a mouthful. Not at all. But emotional problems are the root of much more serious problems. You mean like endocrine problems? Betty's at an age where it's as easy to treat as it is to let it go. Okay? And do what? Well, that's not something psychologists do, it's therapists do. If the tests confirm my hunch, I'll refer Betty to one. Isn't that a bit much to refer a child to a psychiatrist? It sounds to me like you're just trying to push some unnecessary services on us to get more money. I don't want my kid on pills. Who told you that? Not all mental disorders can be treated with pills. There are alternative methods. Betty! Michael turned to his daughter. Let's get out of here. Daddy, but I'm not done yet. The girl took her eyes off the papers. Michael, don't be so hard on yourself. Think of the child. What I'm offering you is reasonable and necessary. My daughter is normal. I can manage on my own. Michael, shouted the psychologist, leaving the office to the man holding the girl in his arms. But it was too late. He was gone. Michael told the household not to let the doctors into the house on any pretext. He was determined to solve Betty's problem on his own, but it was not working out well. Betty, he announced his arrival cheerfully, peeping into his daughter's room. Look what I brought you. In the man's hands was a box of some sort. Betty raised her head languidly, tearing herself away from the book. What is it? She asked tiredly. Will you open it and see? The father smiled. I don't want to. The girl turned away from her father. So you didn't even see what's in there already? Daddy, leave me alone, please. I want to sleep, daughter. But it's still early. Come downstairs with me and sit down. It's been a long time since we've sat together in the living room. We'll watch maybe some roller skates. By the way, there's roller skates in the box. Not video skates, but real skates. I'm gonna go downstairs and you catch up. All right, mumbled the girl. But she never made it downstairs. Kathy took her dinner, but Betty didn't go downstairs. Day after day, Michael watched his young daughter tormented by her great grief. Kathy, he turned to the housekeeper entering the kitchen. Tell me, Michaelunka. What is it? Asked the woman, wiping her wet hands on her apron after washing dishes. I don't know what to do. She doesn't need anything at all for presents. And even my words do not react. She won't talk to me. She signed us up for the racetrack. There you can come, horses to pet, ride, and hippotherapy is called so. She absolutely refuses to leave the house. I don't know. Maybe she should get a horse here. Don't be ridiculous, Michael. You can't have a kitten because of allergies, and you can't have a horse. And girls, it's not even a month since Adriana died. It's May Day, and we're gonna have a picnic. The weather's so nice, she'll come out in the sunshine, and the smell of barbecue will get her out of the den. Yeah, I just don't want to drag her to the psychiatrist. They'll prescribe her a mountain of pills, and we might get rid of one problem, but we'll get 1,000 others. I know how those pills work. I had to take them myself when I was young. And this is me, a grown man, a child. You can't give such nasty stuff. And I don't know whether to trust doctors or not. I feel like they're just trying to get more money out of you and fix you up to death. What does Smith say? He says it's not his area of expertise. They say listen to a psychologist. At least get some test results. I don't want to. I don't believe Betty has that kind of problem. Michael, I'm sorry, but I think you're being a little silly. I'm an old woman. I don't know about all these newfangled psychiatrists and psychologists. There's a reason they work. They're dialysis. Nobody's gonna make you put her on pills. What if it's not that bad? At least go see the woman who talked to her alone without her daughter. They have diplomas. After all, there's a reason they work in clinics like this now. Kathy, how can you be so naive? That's exactly why I don't trust him. They buy diplomas now and then, attribute non-existent diseases to their children. And I don't want to drag Betty around to those offices. It's just more stress. I don't know, the woman shook her head. On the one hand, I understand you, but on the other hand, the girl obviously needs help. And you do not work with her in any way, taking her out at least to talk with the driver in the woods. Take her for a walk. Anything. She's locked up, she won't even talk to me. Huh? And I'm gonna have to drag her in by force? Betty was always raised to have a choice. And now I have to violate my own parenting by forcing her. In the name of and then a nanny. What do you call it? A governess to teach her a little bit. She's already finishing a year of school and again in the first grade in the fall. Okay, I'll think about it. Michael frowned. I'll go try to get her to talk. I bought her roller skaties, and she wouldn't even take the box to open it and see what was inside. Michael went up to his daughter again. She was no longer reading a book, but sat silently looking out the window. The roller box still remained sealed, kittenishly. I'll come in, asked the father. The girl did not answer. Michael went to her and quietly put his arm around her shoulders, trying to understand what the girl was looking at. Outside the window, there was greenery, a garden, huge apple trees, pears. However, even before the house was built, was all covered with white flowers. It was to her that Betty's gaze was fixed. It's beautiful, isn't it? Said Michael. Very, the girl said softly. Mommy loved her so much. She said nothing more. A month passed. Michael was recovering, spending a lot of time at work. Business negotiations and control over his activities gradually pushed the heavy thoughts out of his mind. He came home in the evening and went straight to Betty. The girl had stopped talking altogether. No matter how Michael or any of the household tried to get her to dialogue, it was no use. The little girl was silent and would not leave the room. Michael did hire a psychologist named Kelly as a governess. She was a friendly, middle-aged woman with a lot of experience. She spent most of her time in Betty's room, but she never managed to get the girl to talk, although she did get her to eat a little. What can I say, Michael? Said Kelly one evening on her way downstairs. It's none of my business, but we're not going to get very far at this rate. The effects of psychological trauma are too severe, and I'm ashamed to admit it, I'm powerless here. Are you also telling me I should take my daughter to a psychiatrist? I can't tell you what to do. After all, Betty is your daughter. I can only support her. But a girl needs her mother. Right now, she's living in a world of illusion and memories. Realizing over and over again that Adriana will never come to her again is scary. Especially at that age. Of course, we study a lot. Drawing helps a lot. Betty doesn't speak, but her drawings do that instead. Take a look at these. Kelly handed Michael a small stack of colorful papers. Too much black, the woman sighed. What are these spots? Michael asked. They look like black holes in each picture. If you analyze the pictures, you can assume that Adriana's image is behind them. That's you. That's Betty herself. All people except Kathy, the girl draws exclusively in black. Her mother is not personified. It's just a huge black spot in the center of each drawing. The only thing that is drawn quite accurately and in light colors is the apple trees, which, as I understand, grow in your garden. Yes, my wife was very fond of that tree. They used to sit under it all the time. Now, this tree is a light image of the mother, which Betty projects into the picture, her memories and associations. And the black spot is a vision of tragedy. The very fact that there is no longer a woman in this world, and this stain gradually draws the consciousness into itself. Girls, look, the later the drawing was made, the more blackness there is in it. And what to do? Michael asked confusedly. It's hard to say yet. Of course, I'm not in favor of taking pills for a child either. It's a last resort. It's not worth it to cripple her psyche even more. But therapy sessions, including play sessions, might help them. It would be nice if you took the girl somewhere, for example, to the sea. It's very busy right now, the man sighed. I know it's a terrible thing to say. But after the death of my wife, I'm finally getting into a routine. Besides, I have an important business trip coming up. There's no way I can cancel. But when I get back, things will be less busy. Then I'll be sure to get Betty away from all this. Just don't delay, Michael, sighed Kelly. Betty's health is the most important thing. Yes, I understand. I promise that as soon as I get everything sorted out, I will. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go for a run. Okay, I'm gonna go to my room. Betty's reading right now. I'll leave her alone for now. Be sure to stop by after practice. Kelly left, leaving Michael alone. The man sat for a moment in thought, then went to change for his run. Lately, he liked to go jogging in the evenings. It helped to relieve the tension accumulated during the day and to sleep better. There was no time for running in the morning. But in the evening, after work, he usually went to the forest and crossed the pine paths before dark. Stepping out of the gate, Michael habitually sucked in the tarry air with his nose. Each time he chose a new route. This time he decided to run on the longest route, the one he had followed at the very beginning of spring, when the snow was just standing. After overcoming a dozen kilometers, the man stopped to catch his breath. He did a few squats, stretched his muscles, when suddenly he heard a sound like a child's cry again. What was that? In the same place again, the man thought. Is it really some bird that has a nest here? That's usually the cry of the birds that live in the marshes. I remember when Benjamin and I went hunting, and I was frightened when I heard something like that. It was just a sandpiper. But there are no swamps here, and I could have sworn it was a real baby. The crying came again. The source was somewhere nearby? Michael was curious. He decided not to call anyone this time, so as not to scare them away, but to look for it himself, to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Michael listened. The pines snapped, swaying in the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker, a devil, or some other small bird was pecking its beak. Suddenly, he heard a woman's voice clearly. The voice was quiet. He couldn't make out the words. But it definitely wasn't a hallucination. Coming. Michael followed the thin path. The answer came from the main road, and crossing the tall shrubbery, the man fell carefully so as not to step on dry branches. The voice was getting louder, and now Mikhail was sure he was hearing a woman. Yes, it would be funny if it was some neighbor girl who had come here and was talking on the phone, and I was waiting for her in the bushes. Michael laughed to himself. It's okay. If you scare her, I'll apologize. Immediately. It was almost dark. The bushy paths suddenly ended, and Michael saw a small clearing, in the center of which stood an old log cabin. The only window of the structure glowed dimly. The man froze and listened again. Evidently the woman whose voice he had heard might be somewhere nearby. Strange, Mikkel thought. I've lived here so long. I've avoided the whole forest. This is the first time I've seen the old woman. The forestry is located somewhere else. Though how do I know how many such houses they have in the neighborhood? A child's cry came from the house? Michael shuddered. This time, he was sure he hadn't imagined it. Kathy, but don't cry, my girl, a woman's voice rang out. Michael, safely hidden by the darkness, crept noiselessly up to the cabin and peered through the glowing window. The interior was a single room. In the corner stood a bourgeois stove, in the opposite old shell. A bunk covered with a striped mattress and a pile of some rags. In the middle stood a wooden table on which was a bowl with a candle, which lit up the whole room. A little girl sat on a low boardwalk and sobbed softly. A woman stood beside her with her hands clasped together. Suddenly, she turned to Michael, and noticing him, the girl shrieked and, reacting to her mother's shout, cried even harder. Machinally, the man moved away from the window, but immediately came to his senses and knocked on the door. "Don't be afraid," he shouted. "I won't do anything to you." "Who are you?" A voice was heard from the other side of the door. "What do you want here?" "I live nearby." "I was running, and I heard crying. I thought I'd see if you needed help." "Go away! We're fine." You could hear the fear in the woman's voice. "Okay, I'm sorry to bother you," Michael said. His intuition told him that the woman was lying and that nothing was wrong. The baby was crying for a reason. And the most important thing was who they were and what they were doing in that abandoned gatehouse. And there was no doubt that the old lady was abandoned. The porch was rotted through. There were some boards lying everywhere. One glass window was broken and hastily boarded up with plywood. Something was wrong, Michael noted to himself as he walked away from the house toward the bushes. By the look of the two men, they didn't look like locals. The girl is dressed in rags, and the women are all dirty and in rags. And they live here. No way. The forester would have noticed that there are so many people living in the village that they wouldn't like this kind of neighborhood. No, I'm going back. Look, Michael knocked on the flimsy door again. It's none of my business, but I don't think you're doing so well. Maybe there's something I can do to help.
Go away, please, the woman said. Are you scaring my daughter? But I won't do anything to you. I told you. I live in the neighborhood. Don't be afraid. Do you think I'll believe you so easily? What if you're some kind of freak? I've got a little kid here. Woman, listen, do you really think an insane person would be here with you, my good man, to teach you this door? It wouldn't take a single blow to knock it down.
If I was up to something, I wouldn't be so ceremonious. I have no idea who you are or what happened, but you obviously don't own this house. I don't know how the gamekeeper missed the fact that there were vagrants living here, but keep in mind, if he runs into you, it won't end well. Michael himself did not realize whether he was calming the woman, or on the contrary, even more intimidating. But now he couldn't stop. I have a young daughter myself, the man went on. And I know if she cries, it's for a reason. I'm telling you again, a woman's voice was heard. Go away, we don't want anything. We'll be gone soon, so as not to disturb anyone. I'll tell you what, Michael suggested. I live not far from here. Not far. About 10 kilometers, so to speak. I usually run in the evenings, but I don't take this road much. I won't be here tomorrow, don't worry. And I won't tell anyone I saw you here. If you're afraid of me, I won't change your mind. But I'm not a fool and I realize you're in trouble. If you don't think of yourself, think of the little girl. Come to my house. If you take the big path, without turning anywhere, you go directly to the back gate. Call. Say Michael Williams. Can you hear me? A child doesn't belong in the woods. The woman didn't answer. Michael stood near the old woman a little longer, but realized that it was useless to wait. Besides, it was getting dark. After lighting his way with a flashlight on his phone, he made his way to the road. After running for a while in total darkness, He saw the light of the lanterns that illuminated the forest alleys nearest to the village. Soon he saw his native wicket. From its feathers, Michael stood for a long time in the garden. Looking at the night sky, several bright stars were visible, but the man could not remember their name. Michael. The voice of the head of the security service sounded steady, expressing no emotion. Sorry to wake you. Here's the thing. Good morning. What is it? Michael shook off the remnants of sleep and looked at his watch. It was about 07 hour. He rarely got calls from the security station, but Michael suddenly remembered that she had gone to her daughter's house yesterday afternoon and would be back in the afternoon. There's an auntie on the phone who says she's here to see you. What aunt? Michael muttered unhappily. Some tramp. And she's got a kid with her, saying Michael Williams told her to come. It's still ringing from the forest gate. Michael is finally awake. He immediately realized that the visitor he met yesterday in the woods is a woman. It means that she still obeyed and came for help.
Sash, let her in. Let her wait. I'll let the gazebo in now. Michael, are you sure? It's none of my business, but there's obviously some kind of homeless. There's a beggar from the woods too, probably. I have no idea
How she knows you, but Sasha nervously interrupted his host. Never judge by appearances. These are my acquaintances. We agreed. I didn't know whether she was coming or not. That's why I didn't warn anyone yesterday. Listen, Chief, the security guard shouted into the phone. 10 minutes later, Michael went out into the yard and headed for the gazebo. A woman, cradling a baby girl, sat in the very back of it. Hello? Michael greeted her. I thought you weren't coming. Please, the woman whispered. Help my daughter. I'm scared. I wouldn't have come for anything. But the crooks. Michael looked at the child. The tiny thin face was pale, but her cheeks burned bright red. He touched the girl's forehead and pulled his hand away so leathery he could feel it. First the fever. Yes, she's burning all over. Let's go into the houses. Now I'll call a doctor. He lives nearby. If he hasn't left, he'll come quickly. Michael took the girl in his arms and went towards the house. The woman slowly, Well, why are you standing there? Come on, follow me. The woman hesitated a little longer and followed. Kelly, Clara, somebody come here. At the master's voice, a maid ran out. Oh, and Michael waved his hands and the girl. What's wrong? Sarah, call Smith immediately. Tell him to come as soon as possible. In the meantime, get us some pills. Yes, she took a chance and ran out of the room. Let's make a compress. I don't know what kind of medication to give. Is the girl allergic to anything? No, the mother shook her head. How long had she been sick? She's been sick for 2 days, but last night it got really bad. She was crying so hard, I was afraid she'd hear us, and when it was dawn, I came to you. I didn't hope for anything. I'm used to trusting people. When I saw the house, I wanted to turn back, but Kathy is the most precious thing I have. I'm sorry I woke you up out of desperation. Must have been those guards. You did the right thing. I just lost my wife myself. I know what it's like to lose someone you love the most.
I'm sorry for your loss. The woman said with one eye. Clara entered the room carrying a first aid kit. Michael, I don't know what I need. I brought everything. And Smith said she'd be here in 15 minutes. Thank you, Clara.
You're free for now. I'll call you if you need anything.
Michael opened the box and took out an antipyretic. He poured water from the jug on the dresser into a glass, and, after splitting the tablet in half, handed it to the woman to give to her daughter.
This antipyretic seems to work every time. Hopefully, at least the fever with volume. The girl obediently drank the pill. But, Michael, what happened again? The girl was so scared, she couldn't explain anything. Luckily, I hadn't left yet. Where's Betty? Here, Michael shrugged guiltily. Betty's in her room. She's not the one with the problem. Who is? Smith wondered. Michael led the doctor into the living room where a plague sat on the sofa. In the hall's a mother woman with a similar child. Girls, I got sick last night. They've been sick for a couple days. According to the mother. Okay, Michael, you leave us alone and I'll take a look at the girl. Why don't you go for a walk? Michael went out, closing the door behind him. He raised his head and saw a pair of curious children's eyes watching him intently. Lisovenko, why are you up so early? The girl, seeing that her father noticed her, rushed back into the room. Michael even heard the door lock click. Jesus, what's going on? He thought. Betty is acting strange. I know she's sick, but at least she could react to me. And she's a woman with a baby. I just wish everything would go away. Michael called the office to say he'd be late. Smith finally opened the door and came out of the living room, carrying his briefcase. It's nothing. He nodded toward the girl. It's just an acute respiratory infection. I've taken blood for analysis, and it'll be ready by evening. I'll go to work now and take it to her. For now, I've given her a powder. Her fever should come down. She needs to rest and drink plenty of water. She's very malnourished. I asked Kathy to make her some broth. I've also prescribed some medication that will help her quickly. Thank you, Ethan. Michael was pleased. Thank you so much for coming on such short notice. Listen, Michael, the doctor added in a whisper. Who are these people? Vagrants? I don't know. What do you mean? Smith was surprised. I met them by chance in the woods, couldn't pass them by and decided to help. Oh yeah? You're a good man, Michael. Not many people would stop now. You'd be right next to a homeless guy and offer to help. I respect you, all right? I'll come back tonight. I'm not letting them go anywhere yet. If the girl doesn't get treatment, she's not going to survive on the streets. And besides, is the street a place for a child? A human being, anyway. Michael returned to the living room where his guests were waiting. What's your name? He asked the woman. Christina whispered. And I know Kathy's daughter. The man nodded. Tell you what, Christina. We'll leave now. Thank you so much for your help. Michael looked at her so seriously. Don't you dare even think about heading back into the woods until the girl is better. Stay here. There's plenty of room in the guest house. But I can't. Christina tried to resist. You may not be able to, but Kathy needs bed rest, care, and good nutrition. Think of the baby. You won't interfere with me in the least. I'll take you inside, show you around, and Kathy will be back by lunchtime. This woman will help you get settled. It's a deal. Besides, I promised Ethan I'd keep an eye on you, and he's coming over tonight to check on you. If it's not too much trouble, the woman said. Michael took the guests to a small cottage at the back of the garden. It was intended for guests, although usually those guests stayed in the master's house. Adriana always said that it would be useful one day. It had long since become a kind of family joke. At one time, they tried to put a permanent servant here, but it didn't turn out to be that convenient. As a result, the house stood empty, although the rooms were regularly cleaned. And Michael also suspected that sometimes the maids brought their boyfriend here, but he never did. He himself remembered when he was young, and with Adriana they had to meet at random corners of acquaintances. Christina, do you feel at home here? I can see you now, sir, and bring you breakfast. Any requests? What do you want? The woman was horrified. How can I have wishes? You've seen where we've been living lately. And what we've been eating, you don't even want to know. I'm going to work now. I'll tell Kathy to come and help you as soon as she gets here. You're not leaving the house. If you need anything, don't hesitate to tell Kathy. Okay, Christina nodded. As Michael had promised, the housekeeper called and briefly explained the situation. Kathy, of course, huffed and puffed, but did not condemn Michael and promised to help the guests to make themselves as comfortable as possible. In the evening, Michael returned very late. The case was much bigger than he had anticipated. He was immediately greeted by Kathy. Michael, did you surprise me? Of course I did. What are you doing up so late? Well, I've already put my significant other, Kelly, to bed. So don't go to her. Okay. Michael nodded tiredly. How are our guests? Oh, they seem fine. Smith came by and took another look at the girl. The medicine is working better for her. You have to live in the woods for months like that? The man was surprised. Didn't you even talk to Christina? Yes, I was in a hurry this morning. I didn't have time to ask. Look, I took Adriana's old stuff to her, too. You know, like a suit, athletic sneakers. And the movie girl's clothes, too. I mean, they're in rags. That's okay. You know, I gave you carte blanche. At least they've eaten, they're so thin. Why don't you talk to that woman yourself? I don't want to let you in on someone else's problems without her knowledge. Okay, but they're probably asleep by now, too. I'm going to eat quickly and rest. I'm so tired today. Thank God I'm okay. Kathy, listen. I have to go on a business trip the day after tomorrow. Make sure they don't go anywhere until Kathy's fully recovered. Okay, I'll talk to her tomorrow, of course. But you're in charge. So no problem, Missy. He had dinner, and after taking a shower, the man went to his bedroom. The windows of his room looked out into the garden. From them, the guest house was clearly visible. The windows were dark. Christina and her daughter were asleep. Michael stood at the window for a long time, looking at the night garden. Everything around him was so serene. The June night was so fresh, and everything was starlit. Michael did not think about anything. He went first thing in the morning to Betty's house. The girl, as was her custom, had locked herself in her room. Opening the door with the key, the man went into his daughter's bedroom. She was sitting at the window looking out at the garden. "Daughter, good morning," greeted the father. Betty only turned her head slightly in his direction, as usual, without answering anything. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Michael continued. "I'll only be gone for a couple weeks, and then, when I get back, I want to give you a little present." "You and I? Just you and me? We'll go to the sea." Michael? Betty seemed to flinch. What kind of reaction is that? He thought. Or am I wrong? God help us. I can't live with myself, seeing my child fading away. What else can I do? No medication can help, and therapy isn't working. Betty's just withdrawn into herself. Eating so little, she's almost transparent and unresponsive. At least she's reading books, but that's not enough. Kelly says she's making progress, but I can't see anything. Sure, I haven't spent much time with Betty in the last month, but work is work. It's not like I can just lock myself away. At least I'm slowly adjusting to my new life. But Betty. Okay, kitten, I'm gonna go. I'm home tonight. If you want to come over, I'd love to hang out with you. The weather's so nice out there. We went to the woods. You should see how many squirrels there are. Remember how often you used to feed them from? Michael faltered. He was afraid that mentioning Adriana might trigger another wave of emotion in the girl that he wouldn't even see. So securely, she kept everything to herself. He silently left his daughter's room and went downstairs. Kathy greeted cheerfully. He clapped a woman on the neck in the hall. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I was just at Betty's. Told her I was leaving tomorrow. She didn't react. But on Kelly's advice, I've decided to take her to the sea after the business trip. Do you think it'll be good for her? My boy, the woman smiled. The sea has never hurt anyone. Of course, you both need to get away and get a good rest. Have you decided where to go? No, I'll be on a business trip to look for and book tours, so I can get ready as soon as I arrive. How's Christina been to see her? She'd love to see you, that's what she said. So if you have time, go and see them. Michael went into the garden. The weather was beautiful. He couldn't resist and took off his sneakers to walk barefoot on the lawn. The grass was very soft and still a little damp. Trails in the light. The man reached the guest house. He knocked on the door. Christina opened instantly as if she was already waiting for him. "Good morning, Michael," the woman greeted him. She was wearing an old Adriana tracksuit. Michael noted to himself that it really suited this woman to wash her face and comb her hair. She looked quite attractive, although her face was very thin, haggard, and sad. Christina had the same color hair as Adriana. Only the woman had put it up in a ponytail, whereas his late wife preferred to wear it loose. "Michael?" He smiled. "How are you doing?" "I got home late last night. I'm sorry I couldn't stop by." "I don't know how to thank you," the woman said quickly. "I haven't believed in miracles for a long time. But what happened yesterday, I can't call it anything else. I don't know if Kathy told my story. This woman knows how to respect other people's lives and keep secrets better than a Swiss bank safe. Believe me, she hasn't given me a shred of information. Except for the fact that you've been living in the woods for months." "Yes," Christina blushed thickly. "Maybe we could take a walk in the garden, and you could tell me all about it," Michael suggested. Christina agreed with pleasure. "Kathy is asleep now anyway. She took her medicine. She'll wake up in a couple of hours." "That's good," Michael smiled as he ushered the woman off the porch. "I don't even know where to begin. My story isn't the most interesting. It's probably hard for you to understand how a young woman with a baby in her arms ended up on the street. Life likes to take a dark joke. And I, in spite of what I have, know very well that fate can take a sharp turn at any moment. But there is nothing fantastic in my story. Everything is banal. My husband, or rather, cohabitant, a form scumbag. Unfortunately, by my own stupidity, I realized it too late already when I gave birth to his child. Before the birth of the machine, all was quite decent. Not bad job, his own home, even a car. But as soon as my daughter was born, my husband forbade me to leave the house. I don't know what was going on in his head. This man from kind and loving turned into a real tyrant. He was constantly humiliating me, jalouse. Scandals, endless scandals. And then Max never drank. He was always dialoguing. But he got involved with some company. And from that day on, everything went downhill. He started coming home drunk all the time. And the verbal threats quickly turned physical. He beat me mercilessly. I have no family, only an aunt. But she lives very far away, and she doesn't care about me. I used to have friends, but he kept them all away from me. Forbade me to socialize, that's all. And that fact was good for Max. He knew I had nowhere to go. We bought an apartment together, selling our old wallpaper, and I put up with it. Now, I don't know why he intimidated me so much that I was afraid to go to the police. The neighbors who couldn't stand the screaming anymore did. But even after that, I didn't file a report against my husband. After the police left, he just gagged me and beat me even harder. I could only drink water for a week, and that through a tube. And then these scary social services people came. They wanted to take Kathy away. I was so scared, realizing that this was how I was going to decide a child, and possibly a life. I decided to run, waiting for Max to leave. I packed some things and money, and I was woefully short of it. How? He didn't keep cash at home. He only gave it to me for groceries. I packed up and took Kathy and just left. I didn't even know where to go. I got a small room, but we only lived there for a couple weeks. I got a job scrubbing floors at an office nearby. It wasn't the most prestigious job, but it was money. I was coming home from my shift when I saw my husband's car. I was just pulling up to the driveway. Thank God I saw him. But he saw me too. I sped home. He had to go around. That bought me time. I ran into the apartment, didn't say anything, grabbed Kathy and the first thing I could get my hands on. I didn't even lock the door. I knew if Max got to us, I was dead. Thank God our house had a back door. I could hear my husband coming through to the front door. You know, when you've known someone for a long time, you can recognize them. I stood in the vestibule, not breathing and putting my hand over Kathy's mouth. It was such a horror. As soon as I heard him go up to the second floor, I immediately jumped out of the vestibule and ran for my life. It was the beginning of April. Living on the street seemed unthinkable. I was at a complete loss. The only person I could ask for help was the woman I worked for. She allowed me to spend the night at her place and then offered to stay in her garden house. The garden cooperative was located in the suburbs. We agreed that I wouldn't have to pay rent and I could take the train to work. I could take Kathy with me. It seemed convenient at the time, but the worst happened. I didn't even get to live like that for a week. It turned out my husband had tracked us down. He followed us all the way home. I happened to see him through the window. He was banging on the door like that. Thank God some neighbors came and chased him away, threatening the police, but I knew he'd come back. And then I did probably the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. I just took Kathy and went into the woods with her. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. It was like some kind of crazy thing. She kept asking Mommy, "Where are we going?" I didn't even know what to say. I just smiled. We walked for a long time. My daughter cried from fatigue. Then I took her in my arms and carried her. And then we came to that gatehouse. For a while I was afraid to stay there, but there was wood and a fireplace. At least we were safe and warm. I still had some money. I went to town at my own risk, leaving Kathy alone. I bought enough cereal, enough canned goods to last me a long time. I didn't think about the future then. It was all about the present, and we lived there for 3 months. I was always afraid that the forest ranger, or the bums or whoever, would come and chase us out or worse. Then Kathy got sick. I didn't have a penny of money for medicine. We were almost out of groceries. Imagine my horror when I had an unexpected guest, but I decided to take my chances and go where you told me to go. I was so scared for Kathy. I blamed myself for everything. I guess it was the fact that you told me you had a little girl too. That made the difference. Where is she, by the way? Betty's sick. That's all Michael said, slightly shocked by what he'd heard. He had never imagined that such a thing was possible in the modern world. He was used to comfort, money, loyal people, the law around him. To hear that such injustice was happening somewhere was wild. But even more, he was amazed that, driven by fear, a man is completely deprived of common sense. "What's wrong with her?" the woman asked fearfully. "My daughter has a serious mental disorder. At least that's what the doctors are trying to convince me. You see, my wife died at the beginning of April. The daughter, and she's only 7 years old, has fallen into this condition. How can I put it? She has withdrawn into herself, does not talk to anyone, hardly eats anything, and does not leave her room. A psychologist works with her every day, but it's no use. I'm about to go away on a business trip for a couple of weeks, and then I'll come back and plan a trip with her to the seaside. Maybe in a relaxed environment, just the two of us, we can overcome the difficulties. I'm sorry for your loss." Christina looked down at me. "I'll tell you one thing. It takes time. The girl has lost her mother. It's a terrible grief. She's stuck in denial right now. I'm a psychologist by training. I've worked with children for a long time. I've dealt with all kinds of cases. what the experts tell you may be true. But it could be simpler than that. Oh, your daughter simply lacks a mother's love. What kind of psychologist or therapist would you hire? If he can't be patient enough, it's useless. Professionalism alone is not enough. A child needs love. There are all these newfangled stress management techniques. Certainly not medication. You're the first one against pills? Michael grinned. I'm being talked into medication by Betty. But here's the weird thing. You just told me your story, but I'm just confused as to how it came to be that the psychologist couldn't overcome his own problem. You know the popular expression, cobbler without boots. There's no need to think that a psychologist is capable of being a god. We easily solve other people's problems, but we often can't solve our own at all. There's no explanation for that. But many people in our profession often seek psychological help themselves. It's always easier to see a problem from the outside and solve it than from the inside. Listen to this. Michael suddenly remembered. You say you've been living in the woods since April. Well, yes, I run all the time. But there was a break during the winter. After the funeral, I decided to start running again. And that's when I heard a baby crying in the woods. It was not far from the gatehouse. But then I thought I was imagining things. I should have tried to find you back then. But better late than never. You know, Christina, live here for now. If you have a job, you can ask my driver William to drive you into town. It's his job. You don't have to embarrass yourself. The girl's being looked after here. If you need help getting a job, I'll try to work it out after the trip here. But I'm sure you'll be safe here. There's no way my guards will let this Max on the property. Having offered this, Michael left at once, without giving the woman a chance to answer. He didn't visit them again for the rest of the day, and early in the morning, after saying goodbye to Betty, he left for the airport. Time flew by quickly. Michael held all the necessary meetings, concluded several profitable contracts even ahead of schedule. Now, the network of his cafe will spread to other cities. The man was not particularly enthusiastic about it. If he was only responsible for himself, he would have sent everything to hell a long time ago. But there was Betty, and there were all those people who worked for him, made their own plans, wanted to live. Just for that. Michael had found the strength to move on and evolve. Adriana was happy about that. She was the one who could never sit still. Movement and development were her whole basis. At the airport, Michael was met by his personal chauffeur, William. Seeing him from afar, Michael waved hello. When he equaled William, he noticed that the man's face was literally glowing. Like a cat, Michael grinned contentedly. When we get home, you'll see for yourself. Michael. I don't like riddles. Come on. Tell me I can't, Michael. Kathy has strictly forbidden it. Oh my God! Michael exclaimed. You get a paycheck? Who pays your salary? Me or Kathy. All right, I've had it. When the car drove into the gate, Michael immediately sensed something had changed. There was a child's laughter coming from somewhere in the garden. William, noticing the chief's wary look, winked encouragingly at him. Michael got out of the car and went straight into the garden. Betty, laughing happily, was swinging little Kathy on the swing. The girl nodded merrily every time the swing went overhead. Michael looked at what was happening, unable to move. Suddenly, Christina came out from behind the house. She was wearing overalls and gloves, completely covered with black earth. In her hands, she held a small shovel and a bag. The woman was the first to notice Mikhail. She waved the shovel at him in a friendly manner. This movement did not escape Betty's eyes. She turned around sharply. Even from a great distance, Michael saw his daughter's eyes light up. Daddy shouted with all her might and rushed toward her father. You're back. I was told you'd be back in a few days. Not before. Michael took his daughter in his arms and began to twirl her around. "Oh my God, kitten, are you talking?" Betty tears spurted from Michael's eyes. "What's up? What happened?" he asked his daughter in surprise. Adriana only laughed in response. Rose Neft 6, and happy to finally hug her father. "I told you," smiling, said Christina, who approached them. Olisa needed love, but... I saw Christina from the window outside Betty's territory. It had been so long since Michael had heard her voice that he couldn't believe what was happening was real. At first, I thought it was Mom from the back. It's very similar, isn't it, Christina? It's just that I was wearing the same outfit. I took Kathy out in the garden to get some air. Kathy said it was okay. Yes, Betty interrupted. I couldn't believe my eyes for a long time and even shouted out the window, "Mommy!" But when Christina turned around, I realized it wasn't her at all. Then I cried. Christina started to calm me down and invited me to join them. I didn't want to at first, but she looked at me so kindly. Not like Kelly. And to be honest, I was so jealous of Kathy. I didn't even know that was her name at the time. She's swinging. And I'm sitting in this stuffy room. And you haven't been in for a while? It wasn't so lonely. So I went out, and Christina called me over for tea. Why don't you even tell me we have someone living in the guest house? You didn't ask, Dad smiled. Daddy! Please ask Christina to stay with us a little longer. I like talking to her so much. She doesn't treat me like a baby at all. Even Kathy thinks of me as a child. And Christina? I see you two have become real friends, haven't you? Michael was surprised. Christina, I can't thank you enough for the miracle you've done. No miracles. I told you that you have to find an approach to the child. And foxes are very smart. It's a girl. We bonded with her as equals right away. I don't know why you even bring a child here. Betty understands more than most adults. She just needed to talk to someone who would listen, you know. And I had a lot of time and desire, and it's easy to lighten the mood. Are you saying it's that simple? Why do you have to make it so complicated? People make up a lot of problems for themselves and take such detours that they forget what they're doing. As soon as I saw Betty, I knew she was scared and lonely. And the best remedy is laughter and good company. Daddy's upset all of a sudden, Betty said. Yes, granddaughter. Daddy, tell me, now that I'm well? We're not going to the seaside, are we? You silly girl. Michael laughed. Now we just have to go to the sea, so go inside. Christina turned to them, realizing that father and daughter needed to be alone. You must be tired from the road. There and discuss everything. I'll join you from time to time. The woman laughed. Why are you in the ground? Just as Kid Mikhail. Well, the flower beds cannot take care of themselves, and I for joy to grow flowers. The woman smiled modestly, but then immediately realized, I cannot sit idle with Kathy's permission. She, and suggested, if it's wrong, I'm sorry. Come on, Christina. You can do whatever you want to do here now. I don't know how to repay you for helping us. Good for good. The woman looked straight into Michael's eyes. When Michael was about to carry her daughter to the front of the house, she whispered something in his ear and deftly jumped to the ground, smiling slyly at her father. She ran back towards her new friends. Christina! In a theatrical whisper, she announced, You just don't tell anyone yet. But you and Kathy are going to the sea with us.